Well, again, thank you, choir. We have been to church today. Thank you. We're on a mission from God. You know those words from many perspectives. Let me share one with you that you may have forgotten about. You remember Elwood Blues pulls up before the prison to get his brother, Joliet Jake, and gets him in the car and says, all right, we're on a mission from God. It's 106 miles to Chicago. We got a half a pack of cigarettes, a full tank of gas. It's dark and we have sunglasses on. To which Joliet Jake says, hit it, and they speed on. Their mission from God. Of course, their mission from God is to put back together the band that sort of was disrupted by Jake's incarceration. Hard to identify a band as a mission from God. If the Blues Brothers can be on a mission from God, you and I have a mission from God. And it's the mission from God that was given to Jesus Christ. John's gospel we refer to as the love gospel because love dominates throughout this story. In fact, the word love is used 39 times in John's gospel as compared to 35 references in the whole other three gospels. And in fact, God announces in John's gospel his purposes and intentions for sending Jesus into the world. For God so loved the world that he sent his only Son, that whosoever believes in him may not perish but have eternal life. God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. So having established this intention, John's gospel then tells us what Jesus' mission is. Jesus tells us that his mission is to make God known by making love known. In the 4th chapter, the 34th verse, Jesus says, my food is the will of God, and it is my work to accomplish the things he has sent me to do. In the next chapter, he says essentially the same thing by saying, it is the works that I do that testify that God has sent me. And then finally, he says, in the 17th chapter, in his prayer to the Father before his passion and death and resurrection, he tells the Father, I have accomplished the things you sent me to do, and in so doing, I have glorified you. Jesus' mission is to glorify God by accomplishing the tasks that are given to him. And the task that is given to him is to make God's love known in the world. Be careful of your thoughts, for they may become words. Be careful of your words, because they may become actions. Be careful of your actions, because they may become habits. Be careful of your habits, because they will form your character. And be careful of your character, because it will become your destiny. We are what we think. Now, this anonymous proverb is put on the lips of Lady Margaret Thatcher in the movie that Meryl Streep portrays her. She may or may not have said it, but nonetheless, it's wise. Be careful about your thoughts, because they may become words. Words become actions. Actions become habits. Habits become character. Character defines our destiny. Before anything happens, there is an idea, a thought, and it's God's thought. I will send my son into this fallen, broken world. And his words, his actions, his character will reshape the destiny of the world. That's God's purpose and Jesus' mission, to make love known. The Gospel of John is divided almost in half. The first 12 chapters are on a horizontal level, talking about how Jesus enacts his mission among human beings and in the world around him. The first 4 chapters are in Galilee. The next take us from Galilee to Jerusalem, and then the rest of the gospel moves from a horizontal to a vertical dimension. Beginning with chapter 13, we hear about how the relationship between the Father and the Son has now, because of what has gone before and what will happen now, it will allow a vertical relationship to develop between the human race and our God. That just as Jesus is going to return to the Father who sent him, it's how he gets there which will open the way for us to follow. Jesus' cross, his resurrection, will lead the way. And then John adds one more chapter, in the 21st chapter, back in Galilee, restoring, renewing, bringing back in his old friends and setting them on the mission too. Renewing them and their commitment to the mission of being those who make God's love known in the world so that people may possess everlasting life. In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks on the United States, a group of angry young men went in and just trashed a Middle Eastern restaurant in their neighborhood because they knew it to be a place owned and operated by Muslims. There were surveillance cameras, and they were all arrested, and they were taken to court, and the Muslim owner of the restaurant was asked, "Do you want to press charges against these boys?" He says, "I don't know what good that would do." They were angry and afraid. I don't see how putting them in prison will make them less angry and less afraid. Let's just forget the whole thing. The young men were so impressed by the mercy and the kindness of the man that they had wronged that they voluntarily went to his restaurant and cleaned up the place and repaired what they could and paid for the replacement of what could not be repaired. And a couple of the young men even went to work there. There is nothing like love enacted in more than words but in deeds that will bring out the best in folks. And love from whatever source, even the most unexpected ones, will have that effect. Which is why Jesus not only talks about God's love, he enacts God's love. It's even more especially important what he does than what he says. For you see, the focus in John's gospel is for us not just to love God, which as important as it is for us to love Jesus and to become as Jesus is so that we may also be received into the loving embrace that Jesus and the Father have always known. At the very end of the 20th chapter of John, we're told that there were a whole lot of other stories and incidents that might have been put in the gospel In fact, they'd fill more volumes than could be written. But these have been written and have been placed here so that by believing in Jesus, you might have life. It is our faith in Jesus Christ that is our way of committing ourselves, adopting Jesus' mission, making it our own, to make God known by making God's love known, not just by words, but in actions. Stories told about a Chinese rice farmer in the south of China. His rice paddies were terraced little ponds against the side of a steep hillside. In order to get water up into the rice paddies, he had to pump the water manually using a pump that worked from essentially a bicycle pedaling. Each day he pumped water up into his rice paddies, and that was just part of his work and his life. But each night, a neighbor a little further down the hill decided that instead of pedaling his water up from the stream, he would simply breach a hole in the wall of his neighbor's rice paddy and let the water flow down. And whenever he has done this, then the Christian farmer went and fixed the breach in the wall and had to pedal up back more water into his rice paddies. This happened on several occasions, one after another, and the hard work of refilling the rice paddy and fixing the breach of the wall just got to the farmer. He gathered his friends from church and he asked them, "How long must I do this?" Almost like Peter asking, "How long must I forgive my brother? How long must I do this? How long must I ignore the wrong being done to me? Shall I always just have to endure this?" So the friends got together and they prayed. And they could come to only one conclusion. As Christians, we must not just do the right thing, we must do the thing that is more than right, whatever that might be. And so it occurred to the Chinese farmer that what he would do would be first go to the bicycle-driven pump of his neighbor and fill his rice paddies with water, and then go and fill his own. He was doing exactly the same amount of work that he was called upon to do when his neighbor was just stealing the water pumped. But the order of it changed. The neighbor began to wonder, maybe a little shamed, maybe even more curious. The neighbor came and asked his Christian co-farmer, "What is it about this Jesus that makes you live the way you do?" Friends, that's our mission, to make the love of God known. Not just with words, but especially with action. Like Francis of Assisi counseled his disciples, preach the gospel at all times, when necessary, use words. It is how we live, infinitely more than what we say, that demonstrates what we believe. We have a mission from God. It is to make God's love known. I've heard it more than I ever wanted to, and you probably have too. It's a little saying, and we usually bring it out when people are critical of the church and more critical of the people in it. And we like to say that the church isn't a museum for saints. It's a hospital for sinners. But is that really true? Is it a hospital for sinners? Every now and again, I fear that we may have made the hospital for sinners into a hospice for sinners. You understand what the difference is? When a patient is beyond any hope that medical treatment will be beneficial, they go to hospice care. And in the hospice, we make things as comfortable as we possibly can. As mellow, as quiet, as non-confrontational, as stressful. Drugs are administered to ease the pain, but there is no treatment for the malady ever given. And the folks leave the hospice, they slip into eternity just the way they got there. Just as sick, just as broken, maybe a little more comfortable and a lot more affirmed, but completely unchanged. I hope to God that we are not a hospice for sinners. And when we say things like, well, I know she's mean as a snake and harsh and judgmental, but she's always been that way. We've decided it's just better to stay out of her way. With apologies to Jeff Foxworthy, the church where that lady goes to church might just be a hospice, not a hospital. And I've occasionally heard folks say, well, I know he's bigoted and closed-minded and racist, but he gives a lot of money to the church, and so we don't want to upset him, lest he take his bigoted, racist self somewhere else and take his money with him. As Jeff says, if that's your circumstance, your church just might be a hospice, not a hospital for sinners. One of the things I've found out about hospitals, and I visit them routinely, they are not quiet places. They are places of noise and activity. They don't spoon feed. They provide genuine nutrition. Now, folks occasionally have to suffer painful treatments there. And all the while suffering the indignity of those gowns. The practitioners of the medical arts are kind, but they don't soft pedal and they don't lie to you about what the situation entails. And they know that healing and wholeness is not going to be found just in surgery and drugs. It's going to be found in a genuine commitment to a change in lifestyle. The world needs hospitals for sinners, not hospices. Folks in hospitals do one of two things. They either go home better or they fight their way into eternity, still trying to get well. That's what we're supposed to be doing. If the key questions that arise before a church's administrative board are who's going to be in charge and where are we going to get the money, you might be working in a hospice. But if the key questions before the church is who is in need in our community and what is God calling us, leading us to do about it, then you're going to a hospital for sinners. And oh, that every church would truly be a hospital for sinners. Because if our focus gets upon maintenance, we will always have more things to maintain. But if our focus is upon ministry, there will be an endless supply of ministries for us to do. And if our focus is on maintaining, comfort, calmness, serenity, a lack of confrontation or discord, then we will struggle. But if our focus is upon showing God's love, no matter how difficult, painful, expensive, time-consuming, embarrassing it might be, we will thrive.